It is now. All right. If I can have your attention, it's after 1:30. Let's go ahead and start our meeting for the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency. I call the meeting to order. With that, Mike, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we need to go through roll call for attending board members that are here today. We're a little short today with a couple people being gone. So you want to go?
Chair Nauman?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Borchard?
Yes. Good answer. Okay, Jeff, you want to kind of go through the agenda review, please?
Sure, Chair. The only item that's changing, I think, will be item 6, which will be changed at the podium for your consideration. On the director's appointments, while it's within your board's authority to vote on the new directors today, it's something you may want to consider postponing until the full board is here.
Okay, I would prefer on item 5 that we're talking about that since we're also discussing the Ag board member, but also selecting chair and vice chair, I'd like to roll that to the next meeting when we have a full board.
Great.
Any other changes at this or suggestions at this time?
That's it.
Okay. Do we need a motion for a change of the agenda or anything at this time? Okay. All right, now moving on to public comments. Items that are not listed on the agenda today. Okay, moving forward, board member comments.
No.
Okay. I want you to duly note, Jeff, we tell Lynn how long this took. Okay, we're going on to approval of minutes from our January 27th meeting. Looking for a motion or
I move to approve the minutes as written.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and all those in favor say aye. Aye. Minutes from January 7th approved. Moving on to Los Pozos Basin groundwater management plan status. Do we have for that?
Oh, that's on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Would you like a report?
Do we have yes, can we give a kind of Reader Digest short report?
We had previously had these on information, moved them to consent. Just in a nutshell, the group has continued to meet on a monthly basis. Attendance has been normal. There's updated attendance statistics if you're interested. The group has been moving forward with discussing the basin-specific plan. We're working towards having a Reader's Digest or Cliff Notes version of the basin plan available for the pumpers group to review next month. That is the goal anyhow from this morning's meeting, and I have continued to give technical updates that are in support of development of that plan. So business as usual, on task, on schedule.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, on informational items, do you want to read and file, or what you suggest?
Oh, we have short reports.
Okay.
For your board, if you like.
Okay, I was trying to keep it short.
So I do believe
All right, go
we
ahead,
need
please.
to receive and file the item 2.
Report needs motion.
Yeah, we're looking for a motion to read and file.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. Quarterly water supply project update, please.
Okay, item 3, for the record, Brian Bondi, United Water, and Fox Canyon GMA. Item 3 is a quarterly update on water supply projects. We started this series back in July of 2009. You've heard from Steve Bachman at United. You've heard from Ken Ortega with the city of Oxnard. Today, we've invited Mr. Henry Gromlich with Cayugas Municipal Water District to speak on behalf of the district about the status of their brine line project, otherwise known as the salinity management pipeline. their aquifer storage and recovery program in the Las Posas basins, as well as other issues that pertain to the GMA. So without further ado, I'll ask Henry to come up and give his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. For the record, Henry Gromlich, Cayugas Municipal Water District. And I'll note for the GMA staff's benefit that I picked out this format independent of your... Thank you. And I'm Special Projects Manager for the Cayugas Municipal Water District, and also am helping to facilitate the Basin Management Plan. I'm going to try to keep with Chair Nauman's brisk pace today and simply talk about water supply status, a couple of regional projects that Cayugas is doing, and where Cayugas sees mutual interest with the GMA. The water supply status for imported water doesn't require a slide. As you probably all have heard, there are environmental constraints in the Bay Delta that are going to, in the near term, for the next 10 or 15 years, constrain the ability to move water south through the State Water Project. In this current year, Metropolitan Water District, the supplier to Cayugas Municipal Water District, has asked us to cut our supplies by 15% to our purveyors. And they are in the process of complying with that. And so far, we seem to be on target. So we have a 15% reduction in deliveries of imported water supplies. At the same time, we're continuing with local projects, which become all the more important as the State Water Project becomes less reliable and constrained. This is the barge Valhalla, which, if any of you follow Wagner's Ring Cycle, you'll know as the home of the gods. It appears to be off the coast of Hueneme, so now we know where that is. And this was anchored there as part of the outfall construction for the salinity management pipeline that Cayugas is building. And this fall, we had the barge out there, and onshore we tunneled out, that's approximately a mile from the Hueneme Beach parking lot. We bored underneath the ocean floor and connected up with that particular barge. What you see here is HDPE pipe being launched from the naval base and was floated out to the barge and then pulled back to shore through the borehole that was drilled out to the barge. So it was a lot of fun. All of you probably have wanted at some time in your life to have a Navy, and for a brief moment, Cayugas had its own fleet out there moving around pipeline. And we were successful in bringing the pipe into shore, and this coming year we will be constructing the second half of the outfall, which will be on the ocean bottom, and we'll go out and provide the diffuser and the outfall itself. This shows construction of the brine line within the road right-of-way, and as you can see, fairly good capacity, and we've benefited from the cooperation of all the cities and the landowners along the way. This map shows the proposed location for the pipeline. The outfall, as I said, is under construction, as is this phase 1E. Phases 1A, B, C, and D, all the way up to Camarosa's plant, have already been constructed. And we have these phases under design, and we hope to have the entire branch up to the Somas desalter completed in the vicinity of 2014. So construction is continuing on. We just recently completed a borrowing of an additional $100 million to help finance completion of this facility, and it's moving ahead. Another project that is of interest to both the district and to the GMA is our aquifer storage and recovery project. The point of putting the entire district's water system in here is to emphasize the fact that all of the water that Cayugas receives comes through two small feeders at the far east end through the Santa Susana mountains. And during the last Northridge earthquake, this was closed down for a number of weeks as they inspected for damage. Because approximately 1/2 of the county's population relies on our water system for its daily water needs, trying to have an emergency supply on hand to deal with any sort of earthquake interruption or other variations in the imported water supply is very important. As a result, the district invested about $50 million to build the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project. It's estimated that when fully operational, this would store up to 100,000 acre-feet of water. Currently, there's about in the neighborhood of 60,000 acre-feet. We've been drawing on this supply for the last 2 years as Metropolitan and the State Water Project waters have become constrained. Because the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project, which was approved by the GMA, lies in the Las Posas Basin, of course, it's of, you don't have to follow this. This just shows that we do keep track of the water we put in and take out. It's an expensive commodity for us, and this is just a screenshot of the SCADA system that controls which wells are on, which wells are off, and the various aspects of the ASR project. Because we're paying a premium to store water in the East Las Posas Basin, it's of great concern to us that the GMA have a basin-specific management plan that ensures that not only the investment of the Cayugas Municipal Water District is secure, but that our neighbors have a sense of security that we can operate this facility and they can also have their overlying rights and their rights within the GMA protected. Through the GMA and facilitated by the GMA, we've been conducting a stakeholder-driven management plan development over the last year. And as Brian reported earlier, we expect to have a kind of digest form of what we think is going to work out next month. And as soon as we start to get responses from that, we'll have a better sense of whether we're hitting the mark or if we're really way off. So there'll be exciting times ahead for the management plan. And then essentially, if you look at the situation that Cayugas is in terms of being an imported water supplier and looking ahead to a constrained and less State Water Project water, if you try to think about what our mutual interests are with the GMA, there's really a pretty short list. We, of course, are interested in conjunctive use projects, anything where we can use the surface waters available to us in conjunction with the groundwater storage available and managed by the GMA to help deal with the variability of water supply. That's a big plus for us, and we think a big plus for the GMA. Basin-specific groundwater management is part of the GMA's groundwater management plan, and aspect that we support wholeheartedly. We're starting to evolve from a one-size-fits-all into a much more nuanced and water budget type approach, and we support that and will be willing to help facilitate that. The building of the salinity management pipeline, or brine line, opens up a whole new aspect of water resources that has been gradually lost to water quality impairments in the GMA. We often talk about groundwater overdraft, and we have a severe problem in that, but we also have some basins that, rather than overdraft, are overfilled with really poor quality brackish groundwater. We have flows coming out of the Simi Basin that are working their way through the Las Posas Valley that have a abundant supply of really poor quality water. And we're working with other interests at this point to develop ways of reclaiming that for regional desalt or for potable use, And the brine line also provides the opportunity for agricultural interests to do desalting and reclaim supplies that would otherwise be lost due to salts buildup. Allocation of costs and benefits. This is another area where we believe that the GMA and Cayugas have a mutual interest. We know that if groundwater continues to be overdrafted, but there is no consequence to that overdraft, we don't have the economy to induce people to invest in supplemental water or the improvements necessary to bring the GMA into a sustainable yield. As the source of some of the more expensive water in the GMA, we have an obligation, we believe, to give everyone a clear understanding of the costs that are involved in that water so they can make cost-effective decisions as to supplemental supplies. Finally, both the last two, the scaling of solutions to problems and the balance between interdependence and independence. Every member agency, I'm sure, that's represented in the GMA is very jealous of the independence and the rights that they are able to exercise. And yet a lot of the solutions that are going to be required require different ways of bringing those parties together for mutual benefit. And we are all about that. Cayugas has seen an evolution of its role from being simply a purveyor of imported water to an agency that is really working hard with its customers to try to forge regional solutions. And we want to include the GMA among those partners in doing that. And that concludes my supply update. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Great. Great. Thank you.
Right, let's try the mic again. Lynn usually does this much better and elegantly. So anyway, we're looking to read and file, please. Looking for a motion.
I move to file.
So moved.
Okay.
Second reading.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Nauman, board members, members of the public. For the record, Gerhard Hubner, Watershed Protection District. I'll be presenting, this will actually be a two-part presentation. I'll be doing the work plan update, listing some of our accomplishments. Gerard will be preceding me with the fiscal update for you. Okay. So, as you recall, your board back in June 2009 adopted the agency's recommended final fiscal year 2009-2010 work plan. Part of that work plan, there was approximately 10 core tasks and 13 additional work tasks, which I'll go through as part of this presentation. And this report is a continuation of some of the updates that we've done this fiscal year. Under the general category of general administrative work tasks, we just wanted to highlight to you some of the work that we did following the adoption of Emergency Ordinance D. For example, there was a processing of an application for a new well and a replacement well. We also spent a fair amount of time developing a new form for the temporary allocation transfer for an operator to receive irrigation efficiency-based transfers from a neighboring well. With the budget, Gerard will give that, so I won't go into any details on that particular category. Under our reports section, we have under development our annual report. This is required under statute. We've done this yearly for the last couple years, and we intend to bring that annual report to you at our March meeting. Software application, I have a presentation under item 7 today, so I'll skip that for right now. Under technical services, a couple noteworthy accomplishments or work efforts that we have been working on. Considerable amount of time looking at the agency's boundaries, working with LAFCO and on the boundaries of our groundwater basins and the agency's boundaries. That work continues. For SAG and TAG support, since the beginning of the fiscal year, we've had 5 regular SAG meetings to discuss basin-specific management and strategy priorities, credits, computer modeling. We've had 2 special SAG meetings to consider the possible emergency ordinance. There have been 3 TAG meetings to develop the technical merits of unregistered wells, meter calibration, credit balances, and again, groundwater basin boundaries. Under SEQRA support, we spent some time on the City of Oxnard's general plan update, and we generated a letter in that regard, as well as the City of Ventura, their Saticoy specific plan, as well as attending their Planning Commission meeting. Under irrigation efficiency, we spent some time working with Dr. Stiles on a scope of work. Again, that will be discussed under item 6 today, so I won't go into any details unless you have questions. Unpaid pump charge accounts. Now, this is one of our additional tasks. We have approximately 12 additional operator accounts that are unresolved that we're working through with contacts and understanding the issues of unpaid accounts. Under the unregistered and unreported task, as you can see, we've put a chart up here. This is also contained in the board letter that you have before you today. The number that you want to look at, we started with 74, 35 have been registered to date. We confirmed the 26 have been destroyed. We have 7 that haven't responded, but who have responded but not registered, and 6 that have no response. Under meter calibration, again, we put up a table for you for ease. We started with 1,049 wells. As of February 10th, we have 565 that are calibrated. That third column is the one to focus on. That's 10 that we have remaining. The remainder we've put into various categories, whether they're domestic, inactive, new meters, or other. We have a grant that the Department of DWR has indicated they're going to fund. We expect a contract any day now from them. When we receive that, we plan to come to your board at a subsequent meeting, maybe as soon as March, for final approval. You already heard about the Las Posas sub-basin management development. Brian provided that. Under our ordinance code revisions, as you recall, at the December meeting, we had our first reading of the proposed ordinance 8.2. Second reading occurred in the January meeting, which you did adopt. That became effective 30 days later. And we are now embarking on the second level of revisions. We met actually recently deciding how to move forward with that. And this fiscal year, we do plan to come with you again with some more changes. And lastly, we just thought we'd put up, these are some of the non-work plan items that have come up in the last 6 months. We did have an outreach series of workshops throughout the community in the fall of last year. We had a discussion and analysis for the consideration of expansion of groundwater use. As you recall, we had a special board meeting on the budget in August of last year. We did have some time devoted, Miranda considerable time on the certified mailings and working through LAFCO through their municipal service review as required every 5 years. So with that, that's my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we need a motion, gentlemen.
I move that we accept the report.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Okay. Continue, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, for the record, Gerard Kabusik with the Watershed Protection District and agency staff. I'm pleased here today to provide you a summary report a copy of which you have in the presentation before you on the mid-year fiscal performance metrics of both the annual work plan tasks that Gerhard has sort of focused on the qualitative components, and I'll focus on the fiscal impact of those tasks being performed against budget metrics, as well as general budget format. So I'll try to run through these fairly quickly to preserve time for questions. In general style, we sort of look at some key metrics, and this first slide just identifies the slides that will follow behind it. These are generally from the agency staff perspective, and your board has indicated that you continue to wish to see them highlighted in presentation, so essentially that's how we're going to deliver the presentation. The first slide is just the sort of the top three key metrics. The fiscal health of the agency is sound, strong. There is capacity for the board to proceed with the continuation of existing fiscal year work plan tasks, as well as any additional challenges that come. As your board knows, you have given us direction in the presentation of the budget for next year to provide some updates on the 5-year business plan in terms of how we are doing in the longer term, which we will. Overall, as you can see, revenues are overperforming the budget target, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the pumping section. Essentially, that means that simply there has been more pumping and surcharge revenues reported as a consequence of that overpumping. In terms of expenditures, we are appreciably below the targets, keeping a tight control on cost per your board's policy decisions. And at this point in time, if we annualize the mid-year trends, we are revising the year-end fund balance to be approximately $400,000 larger, $1.8 million on June 30th, if all the remaining trends hold true for the second half of the fiscal year.
On your trends, doesn't it usually show that your first half of the fiscal year is usually more pumping usage than in the second half?
Remember correct. Remember though that the first half of the calendar year becomes the second half of the calendar year becomes the first half of our reporting because there's a 6-month lag. Okay. Generally, the numbers before you today represent 40% of the annual revenue. So we just annualize that out for the remainder of the year, with the second part being the 60% slug. Which will be the July through December of 2009. But we'll see that in this next go-around because of that 6-month lag.
Okay.
This table provides you the 5 major revenue categories, actually 4 major categories and totals. The column on the left is just the rolling 3-year average for comparative benchmark. The next column is the adopted 9-10 budget. The next column is what we have received as of December 31st. And how does that dollar number fit against the annual target, and some explanatory comments underlying and supporting the numbers received. Overall, through December 31st, we've received $601,000 in revenues from the sources identified, which is 73% of the target, or almost 23% over what would be expected mid-year. In terms of the 2009-01 semi-annual statement period, again, this reflects pumping self-reported from January through June, but we received that in July of December of this current fiscal year. And you can see the relative amount of groundwater self-reported in acre feet to the agency, the overwhelming share of which occurred during the last 6 months, but there was some previous years' reportings for a variety of reasons that were not reported before. Sort of David Letterman style here, top expenditures, ranked order, the expected targets through mid-year, any number, if you want to look at it on a strict technical basis, any number plus or minus 5% of 50% is pretty well dead on target to be expected, and as you can see from the table, that's pretty much what we have in terms of expenditures. And we'll drill down on a few of these in a few slides coming up. It's important to look at the PWAC charges, the Public Works Agency charges, which essentially is the contract service rates of any Public Works Agency employees that work for the agency under the direction of the executive officer. The 9-10 budget identified about 5,100 hours of effort from those folks. which equates to about 2.86 FTEs using 1,800 hours per year productive time for each FTE, with an expected cost of about $565,000. On a blended basis, because we're never quite sure precisely of the 5,152 hours how much will be Gerhardt's, mine, Jeff's, or whomever, we use a $100 an hour estimate for budget calculations along the line. Through mid-year, as you can see, 2,950 hours have been logged by Public Works Agency employees under the agency, which, if annualized, would get us to about a 3.28 FTE, but we'll have to see how the remaining 6 months plays out, and we'll be updating you in the third quarter in April, at a cost of about $302,118, which includes not only the contract service rates of the line staff, but a fixed allocation of central services overhead per county board policy, which amounts to $30,000 a year to the GMA, that essentially covers Jeff's and all of the time spent upstairs by central services, fiscal services on the agency, without regard to actual cost accounting. And so that's where we're at overall. We're at about $7 an hour less than our budget target when you look at everyone's mixed rates through the mid-year. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how does this distributed in terms of level of effort and in cost. Now, just focusing on the 5,150 PWAC hours that were in the budget, these two charts just give you an understanding of by percent of the total hours logged. The left-hand side is what the annual budget assumed for purposes of planning, and the right-hand pie chart is what actually was logged by the individuals, the FTEs, indicated on an hourly basis. Now, this is just on the 5,150 PWAC hours. Similarly, this chart just shows the same information, but in terms of cost. And again, to paraphrase George Orwell, all hours are equal, but some hours are more equal than others in terms of cost. So it depends on just whose actual hours are logged, whether or not their slice of the pie is larger and their relative fiscal impact is greater. As you know, the core services, Gerhardt did a good job of identifying the qualitative aspects of them, but the expected amount of level of effort was around 2.3, 2.4 FTEs in the adopted budget. Again, looking at this from the standpoint of the budget and the actuals on the left-hand side, this is how, when we came to you with the budget, we thought that those hours would be distributed. And then on the right-hand side is mid-year actuals of how they were by those core services. But that's, while the core services is the biggest chunk of what we do, it's not everything we do. There are additional services which, in terms of the budget, were costed out to be about 1.25 FTEs. And Gerhardt went through those in more detail, but you can see generally those that were listed. And so when you roll up the PWAC hours plus Brian Bondi's time, which is not a county employee, but a United employee that we pay half the cost of, and legal services time, this is our full picture. So the adopted budget back in August essentially looked at about 6,252 hours of effort from all sources, PWAC, Brian, and legal, at about excuse me, at about 674,000 of cost. And then this is how we did mid-year. Mid-year, about 3,979 of those 6,200 hours were logged, referencing 64%, and about 365,000 of the 674 in costs from all sources, representing about 54. So as you can see, in part from Gerhardt's presentation, we did more work than we had anticipated on the additional tasks, both in time and costs, and we'll see then how, as we go through third quarter and year end, we end up the year. The other aspect of the budget report, under item 7, you'll be asked to take some actions on the database contract. From a budgetary standpoint, the most significant of which is to release $92,000 from contingency to fully fund the completion of the project. And if you do, then this will be the remaining amount of contingency available for the rest of the year, just a little bit under $32,000. So all told, when you look at the entire picture, we're looking at about a 1.8 million fund balance available for subsequent year or other programs as you deliberate in next year's budget. And that number, if attained, is about 127% of the target. So we're requesting that after you hear our presentation, if we have any questions that we can tackle, we'll be happy to do so, and then receive and file that report unless you have feedback or direction to us that you wish to give us.
Okay, gentlemen, any comments or questions at this time?
I was just asked, originally when Mr. Bondi was put on with United, it partially was for convenience and also the lowered cost perhaps. Is that proving to be true? I didn't see a line item compared with PWAC cars.
If you recall, the board approved the memorandum paying 50% of the cost. For the current fiscal year, that equates to about a $48 an hour figure.
I think we're getting a bargain then.
Yes.
Thank you.
David, you have any comments or questions? No. Anybody out there like John Matthews or Rob? This is your chance, Rob. Okay, with that, do we go ahead and read and file, please? We're looking for a motion.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Okay, moving forward, let's, thank you very much. Jeff, let's go ahead and move forward with 4A then. Oh, item 6. Wait, that's right. We rolled 5. As a reminder, we rolled 5 to the following meetings, so we're moving into 6, which is actually, you'll give us more detail because it ties into item 4. Got my numbers reversed.
Good afternoon, Chair Nauman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Rick Virgutz, and I'm here today to talk to you about contracting with the Irrigation and Training Research Center. A couple slides on the background. You may recall in September we brought an item to the board regarding, well, we called it the Irrigation Efficiency Workshop, and we talked about a number of things. We discussed the program development and calculations, and that it was developed in 1992, and at that time the allowed water term was set up to err on providing a little bit of extra allowed water. And the approach at that time was to reevaluate this at a later date. We talked a little bit about paperwork. The error rate was too high in the irrigation efficiency forms that we were receiving. But since that time, this year, 2010, we've revised those forms to make it a little bit clearer, and so that seems to be effective at reducing some of the errors. And providing the software moves forward, we'll be having online the ability for people to fill out the paperwork. I guess that's not paperwork anymore if they fill it out online, but fill out the forms online, which should also reduce math errors in the irrigation efficiency reporting. In September, we told you that we'd talked with the academic experts, and they said, you know, GMA, you're not actually calculating irrigation efficiency, but you're calculating efficiency relative to the allowed water term, which is a little bit generous. In September, your board directed us to continue to work with the academic experts to finalize a scope of work and a proposal and allow the SAG to review that. We completed that. The scope was finalized in January. It had better detail regarding deliverables, and the number of farmer interviews was also increased. The cost was higher, though. In September, when we talked to the board, the cost was a real rough cost, about $85,000. This is a higher cost now at about $125,000. We discussed this item with SAG in January. They provided some comments at the meeting. One of the comments was, how will the allowed water term be different if the salinity of the groundwater is high? And we realized that was something we needed to put a finer point on. A couple other questions or comments. The money should be spent on outreach instead. And we talked about that in SAG some, and we realized that even with outreach, we still have some problems with the way the weather stations are reporting allowed water. And even with outreach and better reporting, we're still going to get irrigation efficiencies that are 150, 200%. And so we still have a problem with getting the formulas a little more defensible. Another one of the comments.
Excuse me. When you say outreach, what are you talking about? Outreach in terms of filling out forms? Or?
Going in the field, talking to people about how to fill out the forms, what to put on the forms, that type of thing. Another comment was, go ahead and fund it, but understand that it won't fix the fundamental problem of supply versus demand. Another comment was the good, solid technical information would provide good information for policy development. At the end of the SAG meeting, the SAG supported moving forward with the proposal. We did provide SAG 2 weeks to provide any other comments. We did get one comment via email that had some very specific technical questions about specific components in the proposal. And I emailed those to Dr. Stiles, along with the question about how the allowed water term may change if the groundwater salinity is high versus low. Since that time, Dr. Stiles has not responded to those specific questions. He's told me he's leery about spending additional time on this until he receives funding. We also have some final contractual issues to work out, really to clarify. He's asked that we use his contract, and if we can make his contract work, we will. We're happy to do that. Initially, we thought we'd use a contract similar to what we used with the weather station contract, but Dr. Stiles has a contract that he'd like us to use, and so we're looking at using that. There are a couple of concerns with it. We've asked for some clarification regarding insurance, limitation on liability, and confidentiality. Some pretty basic questions. Dr. Stiles has asked that he receives an immediate contract for $8,000 where he can charge time to meet with the GMA and discuss the additional questions. GMA staff understands his reluctance to spend more time on this without a contract. I know that he spent a number of hours on developing this with us. So the additional questions that we've sent to him, we don't think would take more than a few hours to respond to. They're really clarifications. And we do want to continue moving forward with this. Using his contract will require some clarifications, and we've got some technical issues or some technical questions that SAG have come in. So we're a little bit stuck right now. We had hoped to bring you the full contract today, and it's in your board package, but at this point it's kind of a moot point. He doesn't want to sign the contract we proposed. We think we have a solution for your consideration. He's requested $8,000 to address the technical comments and clarify the contract. One solution would be to authorize staff to prepare a purchase order for $8,000 to address or to clarify some of these final technical comments and contract clarifications. That would allow us to meet with him, finalize these clarifications, determine if any of this stuff would require the scope to change. And I think that's probably the best solution we have for you today. We wanted to bring you a solution instead of just pull this item from the agenda. So in order to fund the $8,000, I think we'd have to release that money from the contingency. It would probably take us a few days or maybe a week tops to prepare the purchase order, and we could move forward at that point. Dr. Stiles said he's available the week of March 8th, so that would be about as soon as we can meet with him. So that's where we are today, and our solution would be to prepare a purchase order to move forward.
Okay, Rick, just in review, just what you just stated, we obviously want to move forward. It's obviously a good thing to do. We've got some reluctance. We have some reluctancy because of dollar issues to fine-tune the contract. Is that correct? Or is that a
Yes.
fair way of saying it?
To fine-tune the contract, yes.
Okay. Jeff, you have any comments on this process right now?
I don't often work with academia. This is unusual for a regular consultant, but so we thought we'd bring it to your board in its full technicolor glory here. I don't see a problem with the contract. You do need to be aware that in the contract he wants to limit liability, which your board, we're happy with any form your board wants to use. He wants to limit liability to the amount of the contract. It's hard to imagine a situation where his negligence might exceed that, but I suppose it's always possible. And the reason we brought it to you this way today was because we feel it's important to keep moving on this. To move on this, we need the purchase order, and that way we should be able to bring you a contract that's satisfactory to Dr. Stiles, along with the revised scope of work, which would address the SAG concerns at your March meeting, so we can keep moving.
Okay, gentlemen, any comments or direction at this time from you folks?
Well, I would like to see it, at least the $8,000 investment be made so we can keep it moving, and then we can decide if it has gone past what's necessary at that point. But to draw it to a halt right now is probably not a satisfactory conclusion. But I think it's kind of unfair to ask council today the relative value of the two contracts on such short notice. But I mean, it's hard for me to imagine how the university could be put in or do something libelous that would cause us to get sued. I hope we would not get into dueling match over whose contract was correct and cause the egos to become so ruffled that they would cause this thing to come to a halt. It's kind of, hopefully we can just smooth it over.
Mr. Chairman, board members, Alberto Boada of my office has reviewed these contracts and has made some recommendations to staff. On the limitation of liability language, actually, my office historically has been quite obstinate on that point. Many consultants and contractors of all types, recently we had an electrician demand a limitation of liability provision in his contract just to do some electrical work for the county. In our view, when you're a software manufacturer and you sell software off the shelf and you're selling to consumers, you can insert a limitation of liability to the value of the purchase and get away with that. But if you're just a person doing work for a public entity, it's not appropriate to try to limit your liability to only the value of the contract, because the public entity might incur greater damages, and the public interest is not served by having that limitation of liability.
Oh, Mr. Counsel, what I would suggest to you is, as I told Mr. Pratt, we have, this is probably the only horse in this race. And so if you feel the public entity of the California State University system will jeopardize the public entity of the Fox Canyon Management Agency, then we have a duel of, maybe not a duel of giants, but certainly. It seems like the dog catchers suing the water department, sort of.
Well, of course, there could be a substantial debate about, on that issue of whether it's ever appropriate for a public entity to ask another public entity to accept a limitation of liability. But the fact of the matter is, we are merely legal advisors. And so your board makes the call on what it wants to do.
The only problem I see is that if the if we don't proceed with this group, we probably won't proceed at all.
David, any comments?
My initial thinking is it sounds a little bit irregular to ask for $8,000 to kind of review your request for proposal or whatever, your proposal for a job, particularly a sizable job of this amount. That was my first impression, but thinking deeper, given the straits the state and UC university systems are in right now, they're probably backing up against the wall themselves, and he's probably being told by superiors, hey, no more time on this until we can see something significant that we actually have the job. So I guess I don't have a problem writing the check. It seems like, in my understanding of these gentlemen that are going to be involved in the project, they're some of the leading people in the state with regards of irrigation technology and these types of issues. So if we were to get recommendations from anybody, I think I'd like to see it from these gentlemen.
Okay, well stated. Anybody from the audience has any comments at this time? Okay, let's do this. I concur with my two colleagues here. I'd like to see this continue, and I think on the short step, I'd like to go ahead and propose that we go ahead with the $8,000 PO purchase order. Rick?
Okay.
And keep this moving. Then time frame wise, looking back, can you think you're in some level of confidence get back to the board next month with this dueling contract, get it done?
We will
finished?
do our best. Dr. Stiles is available to meet the week of March 8th. And
Although I haven't heard your motion yet.
Yes. We're kind of discussing.
Yeah, from the conversation that preceded this, we will proceed with his contract and the $8,000. I assume that's what your question is. So there won't be any dueling contracts. We'll have one. Yeah, there will be one. Okay. And then there's the $8,000 purchase order.
Okay.
That's my understanding of your conversation so far.
Okay, I'll make the motion that, unless you want to phrase it different, that we do a purchase order for the $8,000 to continue this process with Dr. Stiles and the GMA to get this fine-tuned into a contract that moves us forward.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, just to facilitate the budget implication of this, I think it would be clearer if you indicate that funding of this will be a release of $8,000 from remaining contingency.
And that's what I meant to say, yes. So if you could add that to the motion.
Okay.
So that's from the contingency funds, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Chair Noman?
Yes.
Director Kelly? Yes. Director Borchard?
Yes.
And I think, Mr. Pratt, I mean, the lodge will really look at it. If there really is a disaster in the making, then we probably should look at it again. I mean, that's the purpose of, I have set rules in my house, and they stay just the way they are until my wife says no. And, and so maybe that should play along here.
Well, we are going to see the contract at next meeting, correct?
You will.
So it's not like we're approving the contract at this point.
Yes, it's not a blank check or a blank process, so it's going to be done in the right way. Okay. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 7, the groundwater resource management software application.
Hello again, Gerhard Huebner, Watershed Protection District. I will be presenting this item. I also have representatives of County IT Services, which will introduce about midway through my presentation. I'm going to give, as part of my presentation, a little bit of background on where we're at and the schedule, and midway through, we're going to have a demonstration for you to show you exactly some of the work products that we have to date. So as you recall, your board adopted at a hearing, at an item that we had back in September, the draft system requirements for the GMA, what we're calling the Groundwater Resource Management Software Application. You did, your board did authorize agency staff to move forward in developing these services with IT Services. It included that the software system be delivered in June of 2010 and then be independent of the county system if desired. And direction was also provided to release funds at that time from contingency in $50,000 increments to fund the work. The project is essentially in two phases. Phase one of the project is on schedule and on budget. The target completion date is June 30th, 2010, as we indicated, and the cost at $43,060. There is a phase two that will come online in August 2010. Those targeted items are the irrigation efficiency reporting and the well permit applications. Why those could go to phase two, they're not necessary at the time that we go online in June or July 1st as a practical matter. So they're not needed at that point. We can roll those to phase two, but they're going to be included as part of the whole total package. We've also included a detailed schedule as part of attachment 7A of this item. So a little chronology. Back in November of last year, the system requirements were reviewed, gone over, revised, and ultimately approved. Similarly, this year in February, we reviewed the system design specifications. There were some changes, and ultimately those were approved as well. These preceding efforts required a lot of attention. We have a lot of meetings with IT staff. Rick, myself, Sheila, Dave, Brian, all are involved with the interactive meetings. We've included, and part of those meetings included detailed discussions on the flow charts, how the ordinance code processes can be approved, the types of functions we want. As you can imagine, there's a lot of questions that come up. What about this? What about that? And so we've been working on real time with IT services to resolve these issues. So what are the system requirements are? What are some of the features? Well, it's going to be what's called a net application. It's going to be accessible like a utility account. Operators will be able to access and update their accounts, access forms, report allocations, pay fees, get reports. So it's not only going to have a lot of benefit to the GMA staff, but to our stakeholders, to our operators and the well owners out there. They'll be able to look at their accounts, see if there's something missing, accuracy. We're also going to be being able to do workflow tracking. For example, if you have a well application, you'll be able to track that application and the status of it and where it's at. Some of the current efforts we have a software module for software administration, some of the automatic notifications, and a couple other things. So this time, I want to turn it over to Mary. Mary is the project manager, and she'll walk you through the demonstration, and then I'll be back with some concluding remarks.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Lintz. I'm a project manager with the web development team in IT services. And I'd like to give you a little bit of our thoughts while we were designing this software package. We had a few goals in mind. We obviously wanted to automate several of the current processes that have a manual process right now in the GMA offices. We wanted to have more accuracy in the semi-annual reporting and the irrigation efficiency calculations. We wanted to make sure that the application was accessible to the owners and operators that have to use this application to file their semi-annual statements, so we made it browser-based, so it's accessible over the internet. And we wanted to update the technology. The database that is currently in use is an Access database, which I think it's a few years old, and we wanted to get it out of Access into something more robust, so we're using a SQL server on that. We're building it for three main audiences. There are a few different types of users that will use this system, but mainly it's the operators, the owners, and the GMA staff. So most of the focus on this application is on those individuals. The security of the application will guarantee that nobody's going to see anyone else's filings. If I'm an operator and you're an operator, you're not going to be able to see my wells, you're not going to be able to see my semi-annual filings or irrigation efficiency applications. Only the GMA staff will be able to see that information. So let's take a look at what we've got so far. Now keep in mind, this is a live demo of a software development effort. So it's the equivalent of building a house. I would say at this point, we've probably got some rebar in the ground and we've laid the foundation, but there's no drywall on the walls yet, okay? And we've probably gotten about halfway through the kitchen. We're about 17% finished with the development effort on phase 1 at this point. So a user's going to come to the GMA website and log in. This is true for GMA staff as well as owners and operators. Depending on who you are when you log in, you'll have a different view. You'll have access to different reports, different applications, and different COM codes. In this instance, I'm an operator. I'm actually an owner-operator, so that I can see that here's our notifications that Gerhard was talking about. I can see that I've got a meter calibration due, I've got some surcharge fees due, and I have an application in progress. Okay, this system will allow a user to come in, start an application, save it, and come back. In this case, this is a baseline allocation application. He can go back to his home page. He can at some point turn this in by submitting it, and it'll go through a workflow process. Back to the operator page. I can see that I've got some comments down here. I have the ability to update my account with contact information. I have the ability to select preferences on how I want to be notified. All the notifications are automatic. Well, that's not true. There's some that go out in the mail that aren't automatic. On my home page, I can see wells. I can see the current information on a particular well. In this one, I can see that it's destroyed. I can select my COM code, and I can see all of the wells that are in that COM code, and I can see all the semi-annual extraction statement summary since the beginning of time in this database. This feature has, or this system has, ties in with the GIS. If I select a well, I get more detailed information on that well, including the extraction and the historical allocations for the history of the well. And I can also connect into the GIS database, which is going to open up a GIS component. Now keep in mind, remember I said we're about 17% done with the development. When I open up GIS today, it shows all the wells in the county. That's not going to be the case when the finished product is delivered. When you launch a GIS component, as an operator, I'm only going to be able to see my own wells. And it's going to make it a lot easier for the operators, obviously, to locate a well. Because if every blue dot on this screen is a well. I believe it does include destroyed wells. They'll be able to search on well number, parcel number, and possibly street address, although I don't know how helpful that will be for a well in the middle of an orchard or something. I can zoom in on a well by selecting a few of them. And let's look at this one. If I zoom in a little bit more, I have the aerial picture and I'm able to see the crops. This application, this GIS feature allows you to annotate the map so you can measure out your acreage. It will calculate the acreage for you for particular types of crops, and it helps with the irrigation efficiency calculations based on how much water is allowed. And then you can save this off, and it allows you to upload this map back into the GMA database to be submitted along with your filings. I won't even try to annotate a map right now, but I did work on one earlier, and this basically shows you what I've done is I've cleaned it up, I've marked out the acreage, and I've labeled it as oranges. So when I save this map and I put it back into the GMA database, it doesn't have to be mailed in anymore. When the Fox Canyon staff logs in to look at an application, they have access to the same maps that the operator intended. Moving along.
What, if you have I realize you're dealing with trees in this example, what happens if you have a crop rotation on row crops or vegetables or raspberries, strawberries? What, in this format of information, does that kind of take that into account, the cropping pattern?
It does. If they're filing an irrigation efficiency, then, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, the crop type is used in the calculation because of the water that's allotted. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So yeah, every year when they file an irrigation efficiency, they're going to remap their crops.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
I think the question that you have is in between the semi-annual statements. I don't think we're there yet, but this is certainly, it will leave the opportunity open for later if we go that way.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. As far as workflow, once an operator has turned in an application, it's going to be submitted to the GMA database, or GMA staff, and it will go through an approval process represented down here and below, where there's going to be 3 levels of review on most applications: a technical, a managerial, and then an executive review. Each time a review status is changed, notification is going to go out to the operator and other staff involved as to the status of the application. Operators will be able to see that on their homepage. As far as administrative tools, the GMA staff administrators will have the ability to set moratoriums so that they can effectively turn off permits for wells if a moratorium is active in a basin. They can turn off the GIS component and the electronic commerce component. This system does allow you to pay your surcharges over the internet with your filing. And the reason they can turn those off is the requirement that the system be independent of the county network. However, if you're going to be independent of the county network, you're going to lose certain functionality. And the e-commerce and the GIS capability are 2 of those things. Okay?
If I remember correctly, that was one of the criteria from the board and the request of our operators that we keep it independent of the county.
Correct. And basically what's going to happen, if they turn off the ability to do e-commerce or to create maps, all that's going to happen, that the application will continue to run exactly as it is. You just don't see the links to go into those sections. So,
Would we, if we moved, was ported out, would we be able to link like with AirPhoto, you think, or Google?
yeah,
or?
And for the most part, even if you decide to host off the county network, you're not necessarily going to lose the functionality so long as the communication between where you put this application and the county network
Right.
is still...
But we were envisioning maybe a divorce.
Well...
Yes, you could divorce.
divorce. Yes. There's a basic billing module included in this that allows Fox Canyon staff to apply payments, create corrected bills, and in general just do the financial housekeeping of the fees that are due. And then I think we've got a number of reports that are going to be available. Some are available to owners, some are available to operators, all are available to the GMA staff. Now, none of those have been developed, obviously. We have focused on the operator's homepage and the administrator's homepage. The administrator's homepage has some additional functionality in it. It, too, has notifications of the status of various applications that might be in progress, but it's also got the ability to send out notifications for meter calibrations, semi-annual statements due, things like that. And that concludes my demo. Any questions?
I just think, thank you, I appreciate it. It looks very good from my view.
Thank you.
David? I just want to say, Mary, thank you very much. It's very impressive. It's nice to get us up to a level of technology that's what we've been waiting for. And your request is what?
Oh, well, I just jumped, maybe I don't even need to do my conclusion.
No, let's get to the end unless we have comments from the audience.
Yeah.
Get right to the end.
Today's request is that you release a total of $92,000 from operating contingency to fund the completion of the approved IT contract for the project. And with that, you'll be able to complete the expenditures for development, implementation, testing, and acceptance.
And just a reminder, we're on schedule, on timing, everything's right on target, right?
Right.
Okay, with that, that'll be my motion.
Second.
Okay, with that, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, or did we need to do a roll call? Okay, back it up, we're going to roll call.
Chair Noman,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Borchard,
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Chair Noman, one item under the Executive Officer's Report under 8D, the 18th Annual AWA Water Symposium scheduled for April 15th. Traditionally, the GMA has purchased a table for the board members and staff who attend. We have done that this year, and we'll leave it at one table unless you tell us otherwise.
That sounds good to me, gentlemen. Any other requests?
None.
Make it so. Okay, with that, what else do we have this afternoon? Is that about it?
I would just like to comment that I don't know. I think the three of us can get this done a lot quicker.
Duly noted. Put that.
Do we not have to file and receive and file the administrative reports, or what's up? No. Okay.
I think we're done. Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned until, unless I call the chair until our next regular meeting, which is scheduled, Jeff, when? March 24th. Thank you. March 24th it is. Thank you for coming this afternoon.